Welcome to this edition of Colors of Life. Today we'll be talking about millennial parenting. Joining me on the show is Nneka Anyachebelu, popularly known as Teacher Nneka. She had spent 13 years in the bank when God called her and gave her this interesting assignment to work with children and parents. We're going to be talking to her about parenting in this millennium. Nneka, welcome. I'm so glad to have you here. You're such a busy woman. I was wondering if you would have time for us.
If I'm good.
When did you start the Word Center? Tell us what it is about.
We started in 2005, February the 5th.
It's called the Family Word.
It's called the Family Word Center. So we started off as a ministry dedicated to teaching children, intentionally teaching children the word to bridge the gap. Because, you know, from when they are little, they go to school, everything is structured, but their spiritual life is not structured because they just go to church on Sunday. And with what is happening in the millennium, it is not enough. It is not even close. So the whole idea was we came in as a bridge to be intentional, the way the school system is structured, and somebody just follows through. So that was what we came in to do. And then when we started with the children, we found that the problem in the millennium or the millennial age is not the children, but it's actually the parent. So except the parenting approach changes, we might not be able to achieve much with the children. So that was when we started the parenting. And that is why it's called the Family Word Center. So it's not just to say enrolling your children in the Word Center is enough. The parents will have to also, there has to be a reset in the lifestyles of the parents as well. And then from that, we now got into the Word Center Resort because we found out that so many parents, as much as they wanted to help their children become like spiritual giants, morally excellent and all of that, the parents are bombarded with a lot of things. Parents are depressed, parents are burnt out from daily secular activities. So if their minds were not stable, they might not be able to actually raise these children. So we had to start the Word Center Resort where parents will have to come in to detox when they are burnt out, like a little hideaway, because you have to be stable.
Is it a resident?
It's not residential. It's like a day getaway, 2 days getaway and all of that. So that's what the Word Center. So the Word Center is home for the children, a children Bible school, parenting training and seminars, Christian resort. We have a biblical museum right now because people in the secular, there's so much expression. But in spiritual things, you just pick the Bible and talk to children and then you walk away and children are like, okay, you know, Jesus died for you, and the child is asking, who is he? Did I ask him? Because we're not intentional and there are no visuals. So we have a Bible. So now it's also a home for a biblical museum. And then we have, we got people from Lebanon to build an exact replica of the tomb where Jesus. So these things come alive to children. So it's the Christian resort where, not just for parents, but for children, where what we're trying to do is to make the Bible come alive so that our children are not just hearing the Bible, through the Bible, but actually seeing it come alive.
Well done. And she's also the author of The Basic Standard for Millennial Parenting.
Yes.
What is the basic standard for millennial parenting?
Okay. The basic standard for millennial parenting, you know, we have a lot of parenting program, parenting training, but let me use this, especially for moms that are watching right now. You know, we all like makeup and all of that. And when you want to do makeup, there's actually a foundation. When you want to if you want to have a perfect makeup, the primer must come in before foundation. You don't apply foundation and then bring primer. So all the parenting programs we do today is more of putting the foundation, bringing the primer. So the basic standard is the foundation before any other parenting program you can ever do. And that is parenting using God's standard. And then that God's standard is not something that was just baited. It's actually there in the Bible. It's in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 6 to 10. That is the basic standard for millennial parenting. And that standard says, first, the word of God has to be in your heart as a parent. And that was why I talked about a reset.
Okay.
You have to carry enough of God because there's a lot in the millennium. So if you don't carry enough of God, you might not be able to help your child navigate the millennium problems, okay? So he said this word will have to be in your heart, and then you must teach the word diligently to your children. And he didn't say the church will have to teach the word to your children. He didn't say the Christian school. He said you have to first be a carrier of the word. So diligently means the way you pay lesson teachers and the way you pay IGCE teachers, that is how you have to sit or get a lesson teacher, a Bible lesson teacher to sit in the house and teach your children. And he now says that this word, I'm still talking about the standard because that's where everything in the book. It says, and wherever your child goes, the Bible must always be in the child's hand. But do you know what our children carry? They carry their phones. Some parents can't actually remember when last they changed their children's Bible. But God is saying that they must carry the Bible. He says that Bible must never leave your eyes. So that means wherever your child goes, I mean, the Bible has to be when they look at it. So even right now that carrying the Bible like a book is going out of circulation, you have to introduce your children to an online spiritual community where wherever they go is a standard.
Because they're online anyway.
Because they're online anyway. So for me, what I've actually introduced in the Word Center, we called it digital days. You're not supposed to come in with anything, the Bible as a book. How get online, find commentaries. How does one online thing lead you to another online thing? So a spiritual community. So, and then still talking about the basic standard. One of the basic standards says, this word must be pasted everywhere in your house. And then so many parents, you go to a Bible crusade or something, you get a word, you're excited, you just come to your house and you paste it. It's not ministering to your children because it ministered only to you. So the parents should sit every week, have a family word that ministers to everybody. And that word should be advertised everywhere in your house. And then it says, talk about it again and again. The basic standard is talk about the word. It says when you're on the road, when you're seated down, when you're in a journey, you don't sit down to talk to God, to your children about God, only when you're seated at home, even informally. Because the secular world is also selling things to them informally. Okay. These are standards, but we take it for granted. Like, excuse my language, sometimes you see an advert of maybe a half-naked woman holding a phone and advertising a phone. What has a half-naked woman got to do with a phone? But that's the enemy, like advertising and talking to them informally. So we also have to get our children acquainted with the word informally. So it's not just when you're seated at home. So I cannot exhaust it, but those are the standards. And at the end, your children carry God without knowing, and 24 hours they hear God, they see Him, but first you have to be a carrier.
So you talk about a perversion of God's rule for parenting.
Okay.
Can you just briefly tell us about that?
Now, in the secular world, our children go to school Monday through Saturday. We pay highly for academics. And then they have lesson teachers. Before they come back from home, lesson teachers are already seated. That is diligence, because you want what is taught in school enforced. Okay. And then Monday through Friday, they go for extracurricular. We know how much we pay for swimming, ballet, piano, computer. That is swimming lessons.
And sometimes that's to get them ready to go to elite schools around the world.
Everywhere.
But sometimes for the parents to even feel,
my child is here. Yeah. So that is secular parenting. You're perverting. But then they now go to church once a week. Mm-hmm. So that's the perversion. But this is the only thing that God said talk about when you're seated down, when you're walking on the road. Carry it anywhere you go. Repeat it again and again. But we don't do that. But every other thing we have actually done diligently. So it's a perversion. So at the end of the day, when you do this for 16 years, you're going to succeed. You see that you've raised, what you would have done was in 16 years, you've raised a secular giant, but a spiritual dwarf. I was
just going to quote you. So we end up producing secular giants, but spiritual dwarfs. So we're going to take a break. We're talking to teacher Nneka about millennium parenting. Do stay with us. Welcome back. On this episode of Colors of Life, we're talking to Nneka Anyachebulu, who runs the Family Word Center. We've been discussing how we end up with children who are secular giants and spiritual dwarfs because we're not being intentional about their spiritual formation. Nneka is going to tell us some practical ways that we can build our children up to know God. Nneka.
You have to first be a spiritual parent. Because a dead man can't give birth to a living child.
So how are we spiritual parents?
Yes. You have to first, what is your connection with God? You can't just call a child, come, let me teach you the Bible. No, that's religion. That's like people keep wondering, this child was raised, I've taught him so much about God, but it was religion. So you have to be a spiritual. Your children can only hear you from the depth of who you are, where you are.
Okay.
So So if you're deep, and how first your connection with God.
Okay.
If relationship is broken, reconnect to God and just tell God, I want to know you. You know? So like when I started, honestly, all I did with my children was whatever I did during my own personal devotion was what I shared with my children in the evening at home. So it's not about bringing one devotion and open heaven or daily fountain. No. It is from the depth of how rich you are. So you have to be somebody that spends time with God. You have to be intimately connected with Him. Whatever He shares with you, you pour, because you're not just teaching, you're also training them based on how much you've been trained. So you have to have somebody you must have enough time, share with God, and then share with your children. So that is why God said this word has to be in your heart, what? First.
Okay.
So when you now do that, which now takes us to the next thing, please, no matter how busy or chaotic your life is, you must spend time to have family Bible study. It's a must-have if you want to raise morally right children that are spiritually and morally stable in this generation. Okay. And then I also understand that sometimes you're like, oh, Bible study, how can, when I get back to work at 10, at 9, I understand. But honestly, when there's a will, there's a way. You must include it in your family schedule. I mean, then when I was in the bank, up until I was like any other very busy mom, I thought everything was okay up until God called me and I understood the importance. When I come back, I don't take off my work wear, my suit. You know, then you go to the bank with your suit. I have it on up until I'm done with having Bible study with my children. Because I understand my work for the day is not done until I'm done with that. Okay. And that's what closes my day. So when you have it as a mindset, instead of you spending time in the office gisting when you should go home, rush home. There's work to be done. Bible study is waiting. If you drive to school with your children, maybe it's a long drive and you drop them off and then you go to work. Some people have it in the car.
I think that's a very good point.
So just know that it's something you must create. And then if you're very busy, you're hardly at home, you travel a lot, even if it's on weekends, even if it's twice a week, but your family Bible study altar, because it's a place of covenant. Long after your children have left home, God forbid, if any child strays, you go to that point and say, here, God, on this ground, I raised this child and I put your life in him. Call him back. Having done yours, God will call the child. The word you put into that child will bring the child back.
And I can see that the word, if you have an example, a life example in your family, I think perhaps the first time I heard your surname, Ayachebulu, was through a book that your daughter Kamsi wrote. You know, a book about a young girl whose life was changed because she encountered the Lord. And I thought, how old was Kamsi when she wrote that
10.
book? She was 10. Not only did that book bless me, I made sure my children read it, and I bought hundreds for other children. So tell us about, how did Kamsi come about writing that book?
Okay, then we used to have family devotion. I mean, like I had, everything I share is from experience. So in one of the experiences, I had just read about Ezekiel 40, I think 46, I'm not sure now, where it says, and I went into the water, and then the ankle, then water got to my ankle, it got to my waist. And I was like, oh, this is so, it was a revelation for me. I was so excited. Because what I usually did was, whatever it is I learned from my own devotion was what I shared with my children. I never use the devotion because I have to, you know. So I shared it with them that night, and I said, oh, you can go deeper in God. You can go. So while we were doing this, I saw that they were all very excited and angry. I said, look, how much time you spend with God in the place of prayer is how deep you go. And while we're doing that devotion, she said she fell into a trance, you know, and then we started the night prayer. So while she was in the trance, we finished the prayer, and I didn't know she was in the trance, and I told everybody, okay, prayer was off. And she said, Mom, while you were praying, something happened to me. I saw myself that somebody was taking me towards a door. And I saw heaven, and it was beautiful. And while the door was about being opened, you woke me up. You called us, that prayer ended. I said, okay, it's not a problem. When you go back, say to God, God, this night, show me, I want that door to be opened. And honestly, I just said it. I said, tell him that God will show you, you know. And they were all half asleep. So she went to bed. And in the morning, she said, Mom, when I went to bed, the door opened, and it now started as a dream. You know, so almost the second part of that story actually was really happened to her. So when she finished, and because I had taught them, which was one of the major things that God taught me when I reconnected, was to journal. And I had taught them, and we do that in the Word Center a lot, teaching children for spiritual documentation. Anytime you read the Bible, whatever you feel as an idea, write it down. So I said, oh, write the whole dream in your journal. Okay. So it was 2 years after she wrote it, and then this idea of, oh, I don't even know how we stumbled into writing a book. And I said, why don't you turn it into a book? And then she brought it out, wrote it, and became a bestseller. You know what I mean?
It did. So the book is Before and After by Kamsi Ayachebulu. Neka, you talk about the millennium, the spirit of the millennium. Tell me a bit about that. What are the peculiar challenges that we're facing in this millennium and relating to parenting in particular?
I'll shuttle between children and parents. One of the millennium problems or the millennium challenges, it's or what we have in the millennium today that the parents want to pretend they don't see. It's one. Let me start with the children. It's an age of spiritual degradation.
Okay.
One of the millennium problems is an age where immorality is being celebrated. So it's difficult for you to raise a morally sound child where immorality is being celebrated. So what exactly are you saying, Mom? Look at them. And then if you are not like them, no, even with your Christianity, nobody sees you. So how do you get to? So for parents, it's a challenge. For children, it's also what? A challenge.
I know you were sharing your example, for instance. Your children are in school in the States, the 4 of them. And you were sharing with me some of the challenges.
Yes. I mean, like one of the, for them, they're abroad. I mean, when they're home, okay, Mom, we go to church, spirituality. But when they're out there in the real world, sometimes they come here and say, Mom, I don't understand. If God is so kind, how come this is happening? And I know that voice is coming from somewhere. That is, they live in a world where everything is anti-God. And these people are justified when they're saying what they're saying. So it's not just enough for you to say, oh, I've done my work well. My child knows God. He met God at 14. You have to continue and you have to
continuous.
It's a continuous thing because it's a battlefield out there. One of the challenges also, we live in a world where social media is like, we live in a world of, we know where we live in. Yeah.
We're going to take a break. And when we come back, that aspect of social media is something we're going to talk about. Thank you so much, Teacher Neka. So do stay with us as we're discussing millennium parenting. We'll be back shortly. Colors of Life. Welcome back to Colors of Life. We're talking about millennium parenting with Neka Ayachebelu. Just before we took a break, we began to discuss the grand challenge and blessing of social media.
Yes.
So I know when I was asking you, what are the greatest challenges the children who open up to you, you know, you see in them, and you mentioned depression, identity crisis, and suicidal thoughts. Is this linked to the use of social media?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Growing up, when we were in primary school, secondary school, you had some rich children in class, but they only tell you they are rich. Okay, fine, but some of them we never even get to see their houses. But right now, everything. Do you understand? You know, I have so everything. Social media. Even when you don't want to be depressed, there are things to depress you.
Okay.
So most of them, because they spend a lot of time online, and we live in an online world. So there's so much to depress you. So the children at the end of the day, and social media is about who you are and how many followers you have, how much influence you have on social media. So many children there's no self-worth. Do you understand? So and everybody on earth is looking for relevance. Once there's no self-worth, that's when depression comes in. That is when identity crisis comes in, and that is when
suicidal
thoughts, because even when you're trying so hard, you're trying to get 7,000 followers. The person you've been chasing is on 43,000, and you're wondering, okay, do you understand? They think everything that who they are,
and it's all out there.
Exactly, you know. And then sometimes you're in a social gathering, and let me just use basic line in a class WhatsApp group. You say something, nobody responds to your WhatsApp message because you're not relevant. And somebody else that has up to like 10,000 followers says something. So already you're feeling you're not. So they live in an online world. Everything is based on who you are in the social media.
And this affects even us as adults.
Exactly.
Not to talk about
children, you know.
Who are so impressionable.
Exactly. And then, so when you look at it, we don't want to lie about it. And we're never going to take them away from the online world.
Okay.
So what do we do as a parent?
Okay.
Now, one of the things I've been able to, without sounding too spiritual, but again, I always say I like to sound spiritual because we are spiritual beings, okay? It's go back to the drawing table spiritually. And that is why I keep begging parents that ensure your child knows God and is filled with the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
Real life does not respond to sophistication.
Okay.
So
real issues of life.
Exactly. Oh, you know, no. So the child has to be filled. Just don't know. It's not enough to know that your child has given their life to Christ.
Okay.
That is the mistake.
Okay.
Ensure they are filled with the Spirit so that when you are not there, the Holy Spirit within them will be able to comfort them.
Okay.
I'm telling you, I worked with so many children. I noticed the difference once they get filled.
Okay.
You talk less. And they said, Mr. Neka, I was sitting down and the Spirit of God said this to me, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't say it like this. So it takes the burden off you as a parent. Okay. So when they get to that part of being depressed, let me just quickly share a story of a young girl that said, she's a blogger, because so many of them blog now. Yeah. And she said she writes a lot and she writes beautifully. So she said, but sometimes she writes, she says a lot out there. So her mom had called her. She was one of her first set of children, they're all grown. Her mom had said to her, oh, you're posting so much, and I think you're writing so well, but I don't think you're giving out too much information. But you know how they are, she's young and everything, and she felt, I don't understand what you're saying. So there was a particular thing she said she wanted to post. So she said, Chineka, I actually sent it out to my mom for her to edit, since she has a challenge with the things I post. But apparently, just like the Millennium parents, her mom was busy throughout. Okay. Up until 8 in the evening, her mom hadn't checked it. Okay. And she had said she gave herself a deadline on where she was going to post. And once that time came, because her mom didn't respond, her friends had vetted, so she said she posted. She said minutes after she posted, so many people were liking and commenting, oh, this is so good. So her mom came online later in the night or so, and her mom said, oh, this is good, but it's a bit too revealing, you know. So she said, oh, Chineka, my mom called me and said, oh, this is a bit too much. Why don't you take it down? I don't think. She said, but compared, when I saw all the comments and I thought it was really a blessing to people that she was angry. Okay, I think between her and her mom, she turned down to put off the phone and all of that. She said, but Chineka, by the time I sat down on my own, I mean, she worked with us for years and her parents are deeply spiritual. They are intentional, actually. Okay. She said, when I sat down to read my word, and the Spirit of God said to me, look at Jesus, that Jesus had potentials from when he was 12. And he wanted to display his potentials when he left his parents and went to Jerusalem and left them on the road. And the mother Mary was very angry and pulled his ears and said, I don't want to display who you are. She said, and from that, the Holy Spirit said to me that Jesus was now obedient to his mom. That up until when Jesus was 33, that it was the same mother that told him, I don't want you to do anything, that came to him and said, I want you to turn water into wine. Okay. He said, and then, but Jesus wasn't even ready now because he was now more mature. But the mother knew that he had potentials. And it was the same Mary that said, don't do, that said, go ahead and do. I said, Chineka, the Holy Spirit said to me, your mother is your Mary. Your mother is spiritual. And your mother gave birth to you and has been a part of your destiny. Whatever your mother tells you to do it. Don't think you know more than your mother like Jesus. She said, Chineka, immediately, Chineka, I had peace. I went down, pulled it off, and sent a lovely thank you message to my mom. Now imagine that. Now this is when you have you've put the seed and the Spirit of God. So even if the mother would not have been able to convince her. Yeah. The mother would not have been able to use the story of Jesus. But this is, I mean, the Spirit of God. So, exactly. There. So the first thing I have to do in the Millennium, it's not enough for your child to know God. Make sure your child is filled with the Holy Spirit.
And that
is where the things are different. Yeah. And then, okay, let me just briefly say, then depression is another thing that social media brings in. So many of us Millennium children are depressed. I'm sorry, and they're going to remain depressed because there's so many things, there's a lot out there, social media causing depression. Now, how do you even help them with this? Therapy and all of that is good. But for me, again, what I've seen work with so many children is we have to look for outlets. Parents are equally depressed because we also have our challenges. But as parents, you go for midweek service. You don't know that anytime you're in God's presence, that's an outlet. You go for sisters' fellowship, men's prayer meeting. So within the week, in a week, you've had like 3 sessions of spiritual encounter. But our children have nothing like that. So the depression is going to stay with them because they don't have what? Outlets. So it's very important that your children have outlets, midweek service, and then online. Get an online community for them where they have outlets. There's so many young people now that have been sent to them in their generation. Make sure you hook them up. Make sure you hook them up. It's not enough to tell them pray or to go to therapy. It remains they need outlets, just like we have outlets as parents.
Neka, it's just been an eye-opener, this issue of millennium parenting. Thank you so much for what you've shared. And children can be guided by listening to their parents. That's very important. And parents can best lead the children perhaps by their personal example. It's the God they know they can pass on to their children. We're so grateful to have had you with us on this occasion. Thank you for all the things that you've shared.
Thanks very much for having me.
This is where we draw the curtain on this week's episode of Colors of Life, where we've been discussing with Nneka Anyachebelu on millennial parenting. We've learned the roles that parents should play in leading their children spiritually. And that begins with knowing God for themselves. And then children should also be plugged into God, and children should obey their parents. That really helps. We've really enjoyed being with you today. Don't forget to follow us on social media, and we look forward to being with you again next week. Have a good week.